What's bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 podcast where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time along with the in-game calendar dates. I'm your host, Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathon Dornbush.
Hey, Tom, how's it going? Your totally natural intro that everyone knows.
And also joining us is very, very special guest, Andrew Goldfarb.
Hey, what's bonkin'?
Ooh.
I realized you probably didn't know that that's how I introed the show, and then just immediately laughed, and then it broke me, and everything fell apart, and that's
how we intro the show normally.
I love it. It's that famous Persona catchphase that all the characters say.
Yeah, exactly. That started literally in the episode where Ryuji tried to make it a thing.
I love it.
And it's only been a thing when I intro the show, but it's been fun. Andrew is someone we've mentioned on this show a million billion times already, I think. Andrew is the reason I played Persona at all.
Same.
Literally played Persona 5 on your copy of the game.
That's right. I forgot about that. You borrowed my disc. Yeah.
You gave me the disc, and then at some point I had to give it back, and then I just bought it digitally and finished it on that. But yeah, I literally would not have played Persona 5 at all without you. So thank you for that gift, and thank you for joining us today to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's been really cool because my Persona lineage is kind of interesting because I was just a big, handheld gaming dork who liked RPGs. So I would look up lists of RPGs, and one of the ones I tried, which is ironic because it's now one of my favorite games, but at the time I tried Persona 3 Portable. Kind of bounced off, wasn't, I was like, this is interesting, but, I had other stuff to play and I didn't get deep into it. And then years later, after I was at IGN, we got copies of Persona 4 Golden. And Persona 4 Golden for me was what P5 has been to you guys and Barrett, where it's this really fascinating, sort of almost like a passing the torch or generational thing where I got so into Persona 4 and then obsessed in the lead up to P5. And then now for you guys, I think it's been this really interesting, one generation removed thing where it's by the time the next Persona game comes, everyone's going to be neck deep in it and someone else will discover the franchise. And I just love it. It's a cool pay it forward thing.
Yeah. We've been calling you sort of the patron saint of the podcast because literally to Tom's point, for the listeners and viewers at home, Andrew, Tom, myself and friend of the show, Barrett Courtney, we all worked together at IGN for a time. And I do think Andrew, had you not told us how much of your love of Persona 5 and Persona in general, I don't think we'd be making this show.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Barrett was playing it. I think the first time Barrett played it was capturing for my review.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny. We also, for extra reference, we all sat kind of right in a big group, Barrett was one pod behind us. But yeah, man. Crazy. And here we are. Now you're on the world's most successful Persona 5 podcast.
As Barrett has called it, the longest running spoiler cast of all time.
Yeah, I love it. I love that.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too with the kind of passing the torch, because I know, with all due respect to Persona 4, because I know a lot of people even who say that they like Persona 4 more than Persona 5, who are kind of have played more of the series. But I think it's undeniable that Persona 5 opened the door to the series in a way that previous games had not, right? It got a lot of new fans in, and that's really cool because I'm now one of those new fans looking back and saying, oh, I wonder what older Persona games I can now play, right? So yeah, I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited that we're going to talk about it. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We are going through technically the week of March 7th to March 13th, but this is our second and final sort of dead week of nothing happening. We're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff today. We're going to tell some stories that we've alluded to earlier on the show, but not really dug into as much. And then also next week, which will be episode 50 exactly, will be the final episode of the run of this show, of the Persona 5 Royal. So that's wild, right? We're really, really at the end here next week. And so this is a moment to reflect and enjoy the ride a little bit.
Exactly. And I
That's
still,
so cool. 50 is wild. Like,
Yeah.
that's really, you guys are awesome.
It's pretty funny to look back at this and be like, oh, episode 50 next week. Wait, we've literally been doing this for 50 weeks. like we've been playing this game for a year.
yeah.
And Jonathan, you're sticking to this, right? Like,
So,
you haven't
yeah.
seen the ending?
I still haven't seen the ending of Royal. Like, Tom obviously has played it beforehand, and Andrew, you of course did. So I don't know what like additions happened with Royal. It's been since I played base P5 back in 2017 and like beginning of 2018. That's the last time I saw the ending. So it's been like now 4 years, I guess. 4 or 5
Yeah, it's
years.
interesting because there have been so many more DCEU films now that I'm curious to see how you feel about like when Aquaman comes in.
Course,
Like because at the time, like the Batman and stuff hadn't happened yet,
No,
and
of
the
course.
Snyder Cut, so we
Yeah.
had a different perspective.
Well, and they were still judging like, do we want to have this be all connected, or are we just gonna
Yeah,
do these one-off
totally.
films? Yeah, it's a crazy time.
The joke that I really wish I could have been real is that there's a final palace and we just get everybody to pretend, like get Barrett on the show and pretend there's not, and get you on the show and pretend there's not. That's
been like after we did the Monarchy Palace, my whole thing has been, well, then we just go into sort of the end game, I assume, because I legitimately don't know. Like I've luckily not been spoiled, so it's like, yeah, there's maybe a chance, but I assume there is.
I mean,
not at this point.
when I was playing through Royal the first time, I got like 50% through the game, and I was like, this isn't that different yet. Like, there was a small part of me that was like, did I like misread? Like, I knew it was the end semester, but I do think on first playthrough, like the changes, like the quality of life changes are amazing. But I think like Kasumi shows up relatively infrequently in those earlier scenes, so it's just kind of funny because I was just like, are we sure? Like, I was like double checking. I was like playing the right one.
Yeah.
How can you forget that time that she pirouetted and grabbed a balloon, Andrew? Come on.
It's true. And the picking up garbage stuff, a huge moment.
All those, the big changes to Royal.
So first, let's. We did have a pop quiz from last week, Andrew. If you're not familiar, every week we end with a pop quiz where I take a trivia thing from events that happened or not. In this case, this week, and ask the viewers at home what the answer is. So last week's question was, Ryuji gathers everybody together, and he in LeBlanc to like talk basically, and this is the whole he's moving away conversation. And Sojiro is like very awkwardly like, yo, I can leave if you want. And he's like, no, I want you here. And he specifically says he wants a group of people here for a specific reason. And I asked what that specific reason was, because it was very like, he said he wanted a very specific group of people there, included the gang and Sojiro. And I asked what it was. And did either of you have any other answers for this? It might be a little too granular if you haven't played in a while.
I mean, like knowing that character, it's like I assume it's either something about bringing in more customers or something about like some creepy line about picking up women.
Harsh. That would be so funny if it's like, yeah, if people see the cafe is really busy, people will want to come in more.
Including women.
I've seen the answers from the YouTube comments, to be fair.
There were a few people who got it right in the comments. So the
remember.
answer here was that Ryuji said he wanted everyone who he owed something to.
I thought you said Sejiro said it. So my answer makes way less sense. My answer was about Sejiro saying it, not okay. Got it.
I thought that might have been the case. Yeah. So he wants everyone he owes something to, which I thought was a very Ryuji answer of like, that's like he in his head thinks that he owes all of these people something still, is like very like, oh man.
What I love about, like, obviously without spoiling anything, Jonathan, I do think the end, not even the end, but just like the whole third semester, I think does a really good job of character building, even more than, I think P5 is so focused, the vanilla version is so focused on who's the traitor, like, and that's like such the focus, and it's awesome, and like I love it. But I do think having that additional time after that to like focus on not only the original crew, but on the newer characters, like, just I don't know, I think it makes it hit a little harder, and especially moments like that, I think work really well.
Well, we've talked with a few people in the comments, because there are some people who are listening to this and who are playing P5 Royal as like their first entry into Persona 5 in general. So we've been like curious what that experience is like, and a lot of people like our big question was, you know, after you fight God at the end of the base game, is another palace on top of that? Does that like create weird, you know, rhythms for the game? Is it sort of a weird like whiplash of, oh, they still have to make this one big and important? And I think, like, to your point, a lot of what makes the third semester work is because it is so emotionally focused on the gang rather than like world ending focused. Like, it's obviously the world will change, but it's more about their like internal lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Persona games generally do a pretty good job of balancing, fighting God with like your home life. And I think there's like there really is. You're right. There's usually like the kind of main story boss who's like a grounded character, and then the final boss is you fight God. You know, it's like there's always sort of that like 2-tier thing. And I'm glad this one didn't end with, well, now it's Mega God, you know? Like, I'm glad that it's like they actually, if anything, took it smaller. And they gave, you know, Kasumi her moment in the sun. Like, I mean, I think it would have been weird to add in that character and then not have her as, you know, integral to the story. So I'm forgetting what happens when, so I'm being careful. But yeah, I'll be excited to see what you think, Jonathan.
Yeah. For the record, most of the big stuff has already happened.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
The Kasumi Sumire change.
Okay, got it. That's what I wasn't. Yeah, I figured that was like way before, because like March is like basically you have like the final cutscene left essentially. And that extra palace, I guess. But yeah,
There's the looking forward. There's like White Day. And then, like, the saying goodbye to everyone and the final cutscene is, like, pretty much all that's left. But it's not like there's nothing new in there. It's just...
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah. No, there's plenty to discuss. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we also got... Jonathan, you pulled out a viewer comment.
I just wanted to pull out one comment because, for reference, obviously, last week's episode, we talked all about, in addition to the couple days that we did, sort of our rankings of the party members. A lot of awesome rankings that we can maybe go into a little bit next week, but I just wanted to mention one. Hannah brought up a comment that, not sure if anyone else has mentioned it, but the PlayStation Japan account did a poll for this last year of who was your favorite party member, and the results were actually pretty similar to ours, except for Ryuji, who was in last place. The top four was Joker, who we didn't include in our ranking, to be fair, Makoto, Akechi, and Futaba. And those three were in our top 5, I think. So
Top three.
That's surprising to me.
4?
If only we had a document where we could see this.
Wait, let me scroll down.
It was, for reference also, so Andrew... Oh, yeah, we chickened out. It was Akechi at number 1, Futaba, a tie of Ryuji and Makoto, Yusuke, Haru, Morgana on Sumire.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a surprising poll to me. I would not have expected Akechi to be that big.
So Akechi being 2 on the PlayStation Japan one is like, but
that feels like such a royal thing, right? I think original Akechi, would be shocking to be that high, and I think that's a testament to how well they did in this.
We talked a lot about that last week for sure. That royal changes him a lot.
Yeah, if we had done our ranking just based on playing the vanilla, we probably would have had him much lower too. Like it affects it a lot.
Totally.
So that's thank you for everyone who did write in, by the way, on YouTube and posted the your own personal polls, all that stuff, rankings. It's cool to see how all those differ. You know, I can't remember who it was, but I saw somebody with on really, really high where we had her really, really low. Right. And like, that's totally great to see kind of how certain characters connected with people in different ways or that sort of stuff. Additionally, once again, there's not really any bad characters. Like it's, as Jonathan said, best to least best, right? It's like, they're all pretty great. So it's but let's get in. One of the first things I wanted to talk about this week with Andrew, generally speaking, we've talked a lot on this show about how stupid this idea is. How stupid is this idea? That
the show, you mean? No, I think it's really clever. I think, I always want, it's funny because if the game had you play, maybe they'll do this someday. If there was every day, if you literally had the option to play every single day, I feel like it would be the most overwhelming game of all time.
Sure.
And so I like that they do skips here and there. I like that on it, because like I think the pandemic, like in living in quarantine for so long, has actually put this into perspective where like a lot of days kind of blur together, but on the day where there is like a big work thing or where there is like a significant like holiday or whatever, it does stick out in your mind a little more. And I kind of like thinking of it that way, where like some of the years just whatever, it's a school day, but like, you know, exam week actually is like, you remember exam week, but not much else that happened. And so like, I think it works really well. So all that said, like, I actually think the podcast is a cool idea. I think it's a fun, it's probably pacing wise really weird. Like I imagine Jonathan like it occasionally like because my thing with Persona was I just could not stop. And there were days where it's like it would have been very hard for me to be like, all right, I guess it's the end of the week in real life, so I have to go to bed now, but like I really want to see what happens. Like I think that part of it's probably hard, but I think it's a cool idea for a show.
No,
you said it's stupid. Did Barrett say it?
I think we ourselves were like, how silly is this to play this game in this way? Because obviously it like few games give us this calendar to work with, like our real world calendar, but we were also just wondering about, like, I think what you just said is sort of the biggest thing, that even though this is a replay for both of us, there have been weeks where I was like, okay, I know what comes in the next 5 or 6 hours after this, but I really want to keep playing. Like I get to the end of Madarame's palace and I'm like, but I want to keep going because the group is starting to get together and whatnot, and you have those moments, but it's like, well, gotta wait till next week.
And it was especially funny in like the Christmas episode, right, which we recorded a week earlier, and so we got to that point where Jonathan started not knowing what was going to happen, and like Akechi was alive and showed up in the real world, and then it was like, okay, gotta wait 2 weeks to play more, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, it is. I think the reason I like the idea for the show a lot, it kind of reminds me of the debate of like binge releases for TV versus weekly, where the weekly releases are arguably more memorable. I mean, like more people are talking about any given Mandalorian or, you know, Marvel episode than, you know, a full season dropping on Netflix of The Witcher, where it gets a lot of conversation. But like, you're not, again, like if you watch 4 episodes back to back, you're not really savoring every moment and remembering it.
Sure.
So you guys probably there are probably moments that literally are just deleted from my brain that you guys were able to talk about for a full episode. And so in that way, I think it's really cool.
There are definitely moments. There are definitely a lot of moments that we didn't need to go into as much detail as we did.
There were so many weeks where Tom and I would start the show and be like, well, this is going to be a quiet week, and we'd do like an hour and a half episode because we just didn't know. Like, it afforded us the chance to get really deep into that stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's given us like a different appreciation for the game that I think had I just like blitzed through Royal in a couple weeks, it wouldn't have felt quite the same. But at the same time, it has also caused that, well, I played for 20 minutes this week, so I don't really remember too much of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are themes that come up, right? Like there are a lot of things that, because the game is 140 hours for Royal, right? Or whatever, give or take 10, you know, it's really easy to forget or miss smaller things that come up over time a few times, that like it just is really nice to kind of take those moments and be like, oh wait, we were talking about something very similar to this in a different situation back this and then. And that's like, you know, as sort of overt as the mask idea generally of like, you know, taking off your masks, and every character that you meet in this game is basically not who you think they are the first time you meet them. And like, yeah, that sort of is clear here and there early on, but like if you really look at it, it's like every character is that way in one way or another, and it's really cool to find all those little similarities in those through lines.
Yeah, I think it's interesting talking about your character pool. Sorry, I was muting for a second. Loud cars went by. The character pool thing is interesting that way too. Like you say, On is really low, and I wonder how much of that is because her story, the really resonant parts of her story, are like hour 2 of a 140-hour adventure, and I just wonder if it's like almost a recency bias thing. I mean, not that everyone loves Haru, to be fair, so maybe that argument's bad, but I do think that like the stuff that makes On well-rounded and interesting happens so early in the game that I just feel like that's the last thing you're thinking about after, again, you fight God and, you know, have all this new stuff to do.
Well, we were talking about that a little bit in terms of like, I totally think the recency bias plays into it, but occasionally there will be like, I think if you look at maybe the original groups of like Yusuke, On, and Ryuji, I guess just to like cut it off there, Ryuji still gets moments toward the end of the game in the way the other two don't as much. Like they have some dialogue here and stuff there, but like Ryuji gets the big boat moment with Shido and like running across and doing the big jump and everything. And An is just kind of there for the rest of the ride, and it's like an incredible opening, and I think she's such a well-rounded and developed character in that early stuff, but then she just kind of becomes one of the gang as it goes on.
I think that's why I have a hard time. There are a lot of games I totally get. Games are long. People have lives. Like, I get it. And I get that people mainline games a lot. Like, you just want to play through the story path and, like, you're not going to find every nook and cranny. I think for these games, you have such a different idea of a character if you don't pursue their social link, because like if you didn't get on all the way up to 10 and learn more about her and have more time with her, yeah, it's like a completely forgettable character. But I actually really like her arc and kind of her self-realization, everything that comes with it. And I think these games are really, it's hard for me to think of someone like skipping cutscenes and mainlining and playing through this game, because it's probably such a weird experience where you really just kind of don't care by the end, other than maybe about Joker's story.
It's interesting too, because even more than that, there are a lot of games where I'll do that thing where, you know, even if the voice acting is really good in a game, I'll do that thing where it's like, okay, I can read a little faster than the voice can speak, so maybe I'll just like cut off the end of the sentence just so I can get through a thing real quick. I've never done that in Persona 5. I like always let the voices play out for these conversations when there are voices for them. And I think that is something, I think that ties into what you're saying of like, it does a really good job of making you care for these characters a little more. And it does kind of almost act as like a TV show in that way, in a way that I didn't really like. I don't necessarily care as much like when I played through The Witcher, of like listening to every single little bit of dialogue and every single cutscene or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not, you know, hating on The Witcher or whatever. Just, you know,
no,
I get what you mean.
Game.
Like those side quest conversations feel a little bit more like, okay, I can get through this. I know what's going on than a lot of the dialogue in Persona.
It's interesting because I do think Persona, like the idea of a side quest is interesting, because there are obviously the NPCs that you have confidants with. I think in P5, way more than previous Persona games, those become really valuable because they have gameplay implications and stuff too. But I think, you know, the main characters, I agree. I do think some of those, you know, like the guy in the plaza who gives the speeches and stuff, like I'll be honest, on like a replay, I'm probably not going to pay as much attention to him as I am to like a, you know, like, but your point is well taken though. Like, I do think in general, like, it's role playing, and maybe it is because of the calendar thing. It is role playing in a way I don't really do with a lot of other franchises, where I'm so invested in everything that's happening, and you keep track of so many like plot threads. Whereas like in a huge open world game, you know, when you help this woman, you know, find her way to the well she couldn't, or whatever side quest you do in some other random game, like that's not going to stick with you as much as like, oh, like, you know, finding the painting and hanging it in LeBlanc, you know, for Yusuke kind of thing.
And I think it's also the repetition that the game allows, where there's a smaller group of people you'll have side quests with, and they keep coming back in like that. When a game can make those characters reinforced as mattering to you, I think that, and that works really well here, because it's like you are defined to have at least like most likely 10 interactions with the major characters at least. So it becomes this thing where they are a part of your game for at least probably 10 weeks, which is not insignificant.
And that story is literally the reward in a lot of cases, right? Yeah. Like when you rank up a confidant, you get a new ability from them, but sometimes that ability doesn't really matter, or you don't really care about it as much, or it's very passive in like all the talk ones that are like, oh yeah, you get another chance if you screw up a conversation with a shadow. And then other times there just won't be an ability. So literally in contrast to a lot of RPGs where it's like you're trying to get your stats up to get these stat boosts or whatever, this is a game where you're literally training your stats to be rewarded with conversation and story with a character, which is enough, right? Like, it doesn't need necessary, like, I would do all those confidant links even if they weren't getting, you know, Harrison recovery and those other abilities. Like, I would just still do them because I want to know more about those characters.
100%. I totally agree with that.
Well, and just to quickly ask Andrew, were you saying, because Tom and I are coming from like a less general Persona knowledge well, is that something that changed with P5 a little bit? Like it seemed like you were saying that confidants weren't as like gameplay related, or
so yeah, social links are a little different in the other games in that they're not giving you like it's different for non-party members. There isn't anything you're really benefiting from other than story. I mean, that's not entirely true. Like some of them have locked paths, but for the most part, with a few exceptions, it is much more about just doing it to do it. Which I did. I mean, I loved completing all the social links in those games. But it is this is the most robust they've ever been with giving you rewards, and to the point where there are characters that even if you don't really like, it's worth like leveling up so that you can have an instant down with the gun, or so that you can swap team members to your kind of backup party, and like doing that stuff and only letting it be social links. Whereas like lowering your alert level was something I never really feel like I needed. Like there are some of them that are more useful than others. But that's fairly new.
Give the awkward side eye to Kawakami's confidant line right now.
Which is reward wise the best one. I mean, especially in Royal. Like in Royal, you already have so many more nights, but if you also have Kawakami's like extra time, it's like crazy how much you can get done compared to the original game. But yes, it's also a little creepy for sure.
So Andrew, one of the things we were talking about before this was how many. I want you to break it down. I'm putting you on the spot live on camera. How many times have you played this game, both base and Royal?
Well, it's funny. Base a lot. Royal only 1.5 times, I guess, because no. Well, I started Royal in Japanese, so I guess it's like a full playthrough, a half and a half. So the original game, I imported to. I'm gonna play 5 hours and just mess with the combat, and then ended up beating the whole thing. Obviously in Japanese, obvious, and I don't speak any Japanese at all. I don't like. It's hard to explain. Like I didn't want to get story spoilers, so I was kind of not. It was more about gameplay, and obviously I wasn't understanding cutscenes anyway. But I've talked on other shows about how it was kind of like if you were like in a bar and there's a movie playing and it's on mute, and you don't really know what's happening, but like if someone gets shot in the head, you wonder, oh, okay, well that character got, so you get like broad strokes, and so like. It was actually really interesting because I would see things play out and think I understood them. And then like a year later playing them in English, I was like, oh. And so like, especially when Joker gets shot in the interrogation room scene, that scene blew my mind in Japanese. And because I was like, oh my God, like they did it. And then obviously he gets recovered. But to answer the question, I played, let's see, I had to do... Well, I also messed up both of my platinum playthroughs because I platinumed it in English and in Japanese. So I did like 3 full playthroughs for the platinum in both because I just kept messing up social links. So I guess technically 6 across base game. Although to be fair, some of those were essentially like speed runs. I mean, I was playing on safety, and because it was just for trophies, so I was playing on safety and skipping cutscenes. So sure. I would say realistically, it was like 2 full playthroughs and then 1 kind of speedy. I'm an idiot and messed up the trophy playthrough. And then Royal started in Japanese. I think I only made it to maybe like the 3rd or 4th palace. Played all the way through in English. And then last year, like beginning of 2021, I was doing a replay that I fell off of. So all in all, somewhere, depending on what counts and what doesn't, like 6 to 8 times, I guess. And I've also played, Persona Q2 and Strikers and a lot of the, like spin-off stuff. I love it. I mean, I love it in a way that very few games hit me. Now Elden Ring is maybe in that category too. And Breath of the Wild certainly was. But it is pretty rare for me to get as like really this obsessed with the game. And in terms of the other games, I mean, I don't know if I'm spoiling a later topic, but I know you had talked about the idea of going back to play some of the older games. And I think I'm always really curious when people do that. I know Barrett's kind of in that journey at the moment because they play so differently in hindsight. And it, like I have these interesting conversations sometimes, less so now, but especially when Royal first came out, you would get a lot of people who were like, well, vanilla Persona 5 is like $14.99, or it's included for free with, the PlayStation Collection or whatever. Like, it's, should I just play that or should I play Royal? And it's like, for new players, like, obviously, if you're financially able, you should play Royal. Like, it is the definitive version of this game for sure. Even aside from the extra story content, like just for the quality of life stuff, like Royal is the best version. For a repeat player, and especially someone who played so much vanilla, it was a really interesting experience not having anything import. Not having any. It wasn't like New Game Plus. It was just starting from scratch, and kind of like I was saying earlier, like a lot of that stuff didn't. I was surprised by how like subtle the changes were for the first like 40 hours until it finally starts to, snowball and get bigger. So it is really interesting for like a repeat player. I still recommend they play it, but I do kind of wish there had been some kind of like very light save import feature to at least keep, like they couldn't fully do it because of the new story stuff, but maybe let you keep your gear or keep your social link progress or whatever it is.
We've talked previously about how that's like definitely would have been nice, but also is a really complicated puzzle to solve in terms of like what they had, how they updated the game with story stuff.
Well, and it's only weird because it's on the same generation. That's the only reason it felt weird. If it had been, and obviously I guess technically this game came out on PS3 too. I have a PS3 copy just because I think it's so funny. I've like never even opened it, but I think it's so funny that it was.
Yeah.
I didn't even remember. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
That.
But I think that the weird thing to me about the
release sort of
nope, I lost it. Oh, thank you. Because it's on this as a truck backs up. Sorry if you hear that. The weird thing about it being no save transfers, that you can play both on PS4. So it like becomes this really awkward thing where it's like, well, why can't I, just maintain my progress? Anyway, that was a long ramble to say that for the other games going back now, you don't have that problem because you can just jump right into Persona 4 Golden. Unless you have a really weird specific reason that you can only play vanilla P4, you can jump into Golden really easily. Now on PC or Vita. Persona 3 is a harder one to recommend because the definitive version. I love Persona 3. I think it might kind of stealthily be my favorite. But Persona 3 FES is the closest thing to a Golden or a Royal. It has a thing called The Answer, which is a big epilogue. But FES is really rough to play. So weirdly, the one I recommend to people is Persona 3 Portable. Only because Persona 3 Portable, which is the most recent version of Persona 3, adds the ability to directly control your party members, which you could not do originally in Persona 3.
I've heard that.
And to put in perspective what that means, it means that when you're playing FES and you've been, toiling away at this boss, you keep dying, you finally whittled them down, they're weak to fire. And you know that your next party member has a fire attack. And you're like, all right, awesome, I did it. And then that party member's turn comes up and they use their ice attack that heals the boss instead. Like, that's what the experience is of playing with, really outdated AI and not being able to control your party members. It can just be rough. So Persona 3 Portable is a little bit of a scaled down visual experience, but I do think just for the gameplay frustrations, I always recommend that one to people.
It doesn't have the FES like story edition though? Or
it doesn't have the epilogue, unfortunately. What it does have is a really cool even though it's technically non-canon, you can play for the only time in the series, there's an alternate path with a female protagonist. So you can play Persona 3 Portable only. You can actually play through the full campaign as a totally different. It's not even just the main character is female. It's a totally different female protagonist. And she actually has different social links available to her that are really cool to see the story from kind of a different angle. And that's actually closer to what they did with Persona 2, which has Innocence and Eternal Punishment, which are two different versions of that game with two different sides of the story, which are really cool. So, I think people kind of poke fun at Atlas, but I think they've done such interesting, creative, experimental things with, even aside from the story, just the release model for these games has been so interesting to follow, because they've done a lot of like really fascinating experiments, and some work and some don't. And keeping track of all the versions, like you, as I'm sure I do right now, you kind of sound like a rambling crazy person trying to like put them all into words, but it is really cool that like they've been that willing to give alternate approaches and alternate paths.
I mean, that's even thinking forward, right? The fact that Strikers, which Jonathan still hasn't played, is such a complete and direct sequel to P5 is so interesting to me in terms of like release idea, because I think nobody thought that was going to be a story heavy game when it was first sort of announced as this tie-in.
You'll think it sounds crazy, but Persona 4 Arena and Persona 4 Ultimax are that for, and Persona 4 Dancing are canonically that for Persona 4. So they actually are also like full on. Persona Q games are non-canon, but the other spin-offs.
Those are the ones that mix characters from a bunch of different Persona games, right?
Yeah, Persona Q is the 3 and 4 casts, and Persona Q2 is the 3, 4, and 5, and the female protagonist from 3.
Gotcha.
So Q2 is like, it has these amazing like Avengers style, like it's really really good, but storyline wise it isn't, you know, it was all a dream or whatever, like they wash it away.
Sure.
But the fighting games are like really, the story content in the fighting games is like crazy, like it's huge advancements in the canon for the Persona 4 and actually also Persona 3 characters. Wild.
Yeah, Arena Ultimax, because that's just coming out, like the re-release. I was talking to a few people and they were like, yeah, I'm finally get to see the conclusion of the P4 story stuff that's been happening. I'm like, what? It's the fighting game. And they're like, yeah, no, it continues off of all the other things.
Well, and they're aging too. Like it's really cool because you know, Atlas is aware of the fact that like it's been, you know, a decade and longer since these games. So it's really cool when they do something like that, because you see, like, it's especially cool seeing the aged up Persona 3 characters that appear in the Persona 4 fighting stuff. It's cool. It's a whole, if you really want to get nerdy, there's a whole connected, you know, the Velvet Room stuff. The attendants in the Velvet Room are related. Like Margaret in P4 is related to Elizabeth from P3, and then Theo is their brother, which is the Velvet Room attendant for the female route. And then Caroline and Justine have a throwaway line. There's like a battle you can do with them, and they have a throwaway line where they're like, our sisters won't be happy with this or something, which kind of proves that they're in that family too. So yeah, there's all kinds of, and it gets bigger than that too, but you can't really get into it without spoiling Persona 3. But there's some cool stuff, and I was always curious if they would do a big crossover eventually, because it almost felt like they were setting it up. But now that the core team has moved away from Persona, and Persona 6 is going to be a new team, you know, maybe not. Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Sure. Well, that's something that ties into something that we talked about. This is actually, I really wanted to ask you about, because we talked about Jose in Royal, and Barrett was mad at me because I sort of slandered Jose in that I was like, Jose is a fine character, but totally pointless and completely cryptic and unknowable and like, what the heck? And Jonathan brought up the point very rightly that like Persona has a history of doing this stuff, right? Of like, not in a bad way, just like in pointing towards otherworldly beings that are meddling with things. And like Jose kind of ties into that, but like, does Jose have more context if you've played more of the games, or is Jose it's just intentionally left sort of cryptic?
Well, I mean, you can take an educate. I know there's like a theory that for context to what I said a minute ago. So the core team of Hoshino, the creative director, Sowajima, the art director, and Meguro, the audio and music guy, that sounded dismissive. They're incredible. Those three are great, and they're kind of they're the core of the Persona 3, 4, 5, Catherine. Like they're kind of the core team. They're still in Atlas, but they started a kind of internal studio called Studio Zero, where they're doing a game called Project Re-Fantasy, which I guess is like a fantasy version. See what it ends up being. But they've stepped aside, and then, you know, assuming Persona 6 exists, which feels like a pretty safe bet considering how successful P5 has been,
Sure.
That'll be a different team. So that's kind of the context I was putting out there before. So that said, it's harder to read in and guess because, you know, up until now, it's been a pretty easy, not easy, but like it's been a pretty straight through line of every game. It's like a theme and a color, and there's all these little things that happen when building up to a new Persona game that could be out the window for 6. I mean, they're under Sega now. They're, you know, releasing games in multiple platforms. Like, we'll just see. I feel like it could go kind of anywhere. With that character, like, I know there are theories that maybe he'll be the Velvet Room attendant in the next game, or maybe it'll tie in some way. Totally possible. I don't think that's crazy at all. But I do I do have to wonder if they would do that. I totally understand why people are like, why is this character here? Like, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't, So, like, I do, if they are setting something up, I think that would be cool. In my experience, that's not really what these games do, because they're, like, you have to really look to find those connections from game to game. They seem to want them to be relatively standalone, which is the only reason I would guess he won't show up in the next one. But I'd love to be wrong, because it would be, what a cool through line that would be, and as I said, like, if they did ever want to build up to some kind of crossover, like, you're gonna have to start doing more of that stuff.
Yeah, and that, like, I think you're not wrong to say also just that, like, Persona 5 was the most successful Persona game, so to be like, oh, they'll probably won't do another one is, like, kind of insane, so it's easy to assume that there's going to be a 6. But, like, on top of that, maybe it is also just, like, seeding characters for other things, because they love doing weird stuff like the Q games, and, if they did a Q3 at some point, maybe, like, then they could just throw Jose in there as, like, another character, and then they could add a little line that, like, adds a little more thing to why who he's connected to, and, like, maybe it's just that, right? Like, it's I think you're right in that it's hard to tell, and it's interesting to hear that is still the assumption with more context from the other games, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I haven't really thought about it that much. I think I think the stuff with Igor would arguably be the thing that I find more intriguing about what it means, because Igor is obviously the only character that has appeared in every Persona game. So I think I don't know. It's interesting. I have always, if you want, you can go to IGN.com and read an interview I did with Hoshino where I kind of vaguely touched on some of the larger, like, if you want to get really nerdy, every Velvet Room character or Velvet Room adjacent character has a name from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. All of their names come from characters in that novel. So you can go really down the rabbit hole seeing how the identities of the characters in the novel kind of connect to the characters as they appear in the game. Like, some of them are really a stretch, but it is interesting. So in that way, they definitely are playing with us. And I would love to know how much of that is in localization versus original intent, because I'm sure, there's probably a really interesting handoff there. But
are the names the same in Japanese too?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe so, yeah. And I did ask, in that interview on .com, I did ask Hoshino about that. And he said I was the first person to ask him about the Frankenstein thing, which is just a testament to how most journalists are very professional and not spending their time on, Reddit theory threads. But
I mean, for me, just not to cut you off, but, like, I feel like it speaks to, one, your knowledge base and, like, interest in this world that has, like, especially with this playthrough, and I think just doing my own cursory starting to go down that rabbit hole that I, like, in talking to you have done, has made me start to be like, oh, I need to fully go down this rabbit hole. Like, this feels like, weirdly, this podcast has made me go, okay, I need to absorb all of Persona now. It's just,
I feel bad though, like, talking to Barrett, I'm like, oh man, like, I'm sorry that, like, because like now that he's gone down the P4 and P3 rabbit hole and, like, had interest in the announcement of the fighting game and had interest, it's just like, oh man, like, you do this weird cycle where it's like, okay, well, I'll go back and play Persona 3, Persona 4, and then I want to play the fighting game and the dancing game to get some of that story content. And now I'm like, it's been a while since P5, so I should go back and replay P5 again. Like, you end up in this, like, vicious cycle.
Well, and we are in this weird spot, like, to your point, obviously, especially with it being a new team, we don't sort of know the timeline, but at least, like, in terms of just looking back at the calendar of how things went between, like, Golden and P5, it feels like we're probably within a year or so of a P6 announcement. Like, I don't think P6 is, a year away, but, like, especially with the 25th anniversary going on.
Yeah, they're hard to predict, but, like, you would guess 25th anniversary. I mean, like, you never know, though, because they keep teasing announcements that end up being, like, surprise, it's a new line of hand towels, like, it's not, I don't think, I wouldn't call it a guarantee, but yes, I think it seems like a reasonable, like, window of, like, if they're going to do it, you would think that's when they would do it. And yeah, exactly. It's been, God, like, Persona 5 was announced in, like, 2014, I think.
Right.
So, like, it's might have even been earlier than that. So yeah, it definitely feels like we're building up to it. But again, it's like, you have to remember, after P5, like the Sega acquisition happened, the team transition happened. Like there are so many things happening behind the scenes that like
a pandemic.
The pandemic, exactly. Like I mean, to me, it's like it'll be cool when it happens, but like I feel bad for people. Like every time Atlas does anything, they're like, "All right, this is it," and it's like I've learned better than to get my hopes up every time.
Well,
but,
even the state of play that just happened, we were joking. Tom and I were like, "Oh, because they said Japanese publishers, so like just in case we're like if it's Persona 6, we'll go scream at the top of our lungs." But yeah, I'm very much in that boat of like, at this point, because of all the weirdness of the 25th anniversary announcements, like the Ultimax port wasn't even technically one of those announcements that they've been doing every month. It was separate. So it's like, I'll just wait until it happens. And for now, there's like all the old stuff to go back to. I know it's hard to get, like P3 portable. You can technically get backward compatible on Vita, but like you said, FES is hard to find. Golden is at least on Steam now, but then you start to get into the Q games and it's like, well, they're going to shut down the 3DS stores soon. So go buy those just in case you want them later on. And it's, we're in a weird spot.
I would like to see them.
That.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Vita is actually like weirdly the definitive, because on Vita, via backwards compatibility, you can get Persona 1, 2, 3, and then obviously Golden was a native release. So you can play 1 through 4, Persona 4 dancing, Persona 3 dancing, Persona 5 dancing, all on Vita. So Vita is probably the closest to a Persona machine. Obviously, you could do remote play of P5 on it too if you had a console. But
sure.
Yeah, it definitely feels.
I'm just gonna start downloading now just to be safe.
Yeah.
Did you just pull out your Vita?
I would like to see them do some kind of modern. You know, people always say they want P3 to be remade, which like I love Persona 3. I think Persona 3 is a fascinating play because the characters are archetypes of the characters in, like, it is such a through line from like Junpei to Yosuke to Ryuji is like such a clear path, you know, like there's a lot of stuff like that where like the characters are sort of built out of the same mold, and it's worth playing P3 if only for that. So I would love for more people to get into it. The one I would like them to remake was actually, I was mentioning Persona 2. I think it would be really cool to do some kind of definitive easy way to play both paths as like a remake that bundles Innocence and Eternal Punishment. I think it would be awesome. No one, you know, add in some of the modern, because Persona 2 is stuck in this weird spot where it sort of predates the mechanics, the social links, and as fleshed out as that stuff has been in 3, 4, and 5. I think Persona 1 is even further. Persona 1 is like an isometric, like top-down, weird. It is a very different experience. And Persona 2
is like a Shin Megami Tensei game that started the Persona spin-off than it is just a Persona game. And
Persona 2 is kind of still that, but you can totally read that the DNA is there that's leading into, right. You know, it's very clear to see the path they went on. It's actually why I recommend, it's a very different game, has its own problems, but I recommend Catherine to a lot of people too, just to understand the DNA, because if you even pull up a screenshot of Catherine, it is very obvious how it influenced the design of P5. And it's so obvious that Soejima liked that art style enough that he just was using it for both of those games. As I said, it's a very deep rabbit hole. There's all kinds of if you just play P5, you are not really missing out. You know, like I think those other games are worth playing, but you shouldn't feel like pressure to, you know, oh my god, I have to play these 9 other games that they were just talking about. It's really not like that at all.
And there's some differences too, like Persona 4, you were talking about the character control thing, but even Persona 4, correct me if I'm wrong, the palaces are like randomly generated like mementos, right?
Oh my god, so it's even weirder than so Persona 3, the only like dungeons are a thing called Tartarus, which is just like mementos is just upside down Tartarus. So on Persona 3, you're just unlocking, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. Like, you're just going further up Tartarus, and then at the top, you fight them. It's a lot like Mementos. Persona 4 is, the palaces are procedurally generated, but they're themed. So it's interesting. Like, you'll go to a palace that's like a more traditional, it looks like a castle. Or you'll go to there's one that's like a club, and like you or like a sauna, like they have themes, and it affects like the design and some of that stuff. But yeah, the floor layouts are not bespoke and hand built, they're all procedural. And that's why the palaces in P5 are so crazy and revolutionary, because they're like the fact that they have like hand-built puzzle mechanics and that they have these like completely incredible like visual flair, like that was honestly playing through the first time, that was stuff that was like the most, whew, man, like we really are, because you have to remember those other games are PS2 games, you know. So like the generational leap, even though obviously P5 started PS3, like generational leap was pretty wild.
Yeah, I always forget how old the Persona games are, I guess is the right way to put it. Is like those games came out a long time ago, and so it's cool to see how much, like, it makes sense that Persona 5 is the most popular so far, because it is also seemingly the most sort of modernized of all of them so far.
It's so stylish. Like flicking through the menus is even fun, you know, like it's yeah, for sure.
I mean, just to bring it back to P5 a little bit, I guess, is you know, with that jump, and I think with that background knowledge, what, just to sort of maybe like broadly, what were some of those things? Like, was it the style that really grabbed you with P5, or it felt like, oh, this is a special game like that in that way for me? Was it the characters? Was it just kind of like every aspect of it? Obviously, you had gone in past your, you know, Japanese playthrough, but
you mean while playing it, or while they were like marketing it?
While playing it, I think.
Yeah, well, because the style is the most eye-catching. Like, you know, the people who really didn't care about these games before, like everybody turned their head just if only for the style of how cool this game looks.
Yeah, the combat UI alone is.
Oh my god. Yeah, I remember like viral tweets of like, this is what the victory screen looks like. You know, like just the most simple stuff that like now we don't even think about was like or like when you go to see like Takemi in the menu, like the silhouette flips her legs back and forth in the you know, little things like that, or like in the gun shop, like there's so much cool just visual design stuff. And honestly, I do think like my shallow answer is like that is the thing that kept blowing my mind while I was playing. It was just like, ooh, pretty. I think the sort of deeper layer, like once you're past the outer cookie exterior and into the cream filling, I do think is the characters. I do think like I think I have a weird thing where like the Persona 3, I got this question a lot when I reviewed P5. Persona 3, I think, is my favorite story because the stakes are so big that Persona 4, it's like a Scooby-Doo mystery in a little port town, and you're, you know, the whole town will be destroyed if we don't save it, but it isn't. Persona 3 is like the whole damn world is going to end if we don't, you know, it's like the stakes in those games are so big. Persona 5 is like somewhere in the middle where it almost seems it's like, somehow this will only affect Japan, you know, like they never really get into like the whole world will end, although I assume if like a bunch of scary stuff happened in Japan, it would not affect everywhere, but like still I think it finds a good middle ground. But I think Persona 4, because it's so small, had these amazing Scooby Gang character moments where you care about those characters so much in that game, and I think they really nailed it. In by the end, like that's just the thing that hit hardest. Persona 5, when it came out, felt almost like the characters were great, but it just didn't feel like their focus as much. I think Royal really fixed that. I think Royal really, like we were saying earlier, like you get those character payoffs now. Like Akechi is the perfect example of someone who went from kind of two-dimensional to a really well-rounded, interesting character that is super beloved now. So anyway, that was a really long, rambling answer to say like it was a little bit of everything, and it felt like kind of a drip feed of like the first playthrough. I was like, how is this game so good, you know? And like we were on the 100-point scale at the time, so I think I gave it a 9.7 is what I ended up doing. So I had like pretty minor criticisms. I think on the modern scale, I do consider it a masterpiece. Like I do think if I were reviewing it again today, on just the 10-point scale, I would probably do the 10. I think it would be above the 9, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about.
And Liana Hafer, who reviewed Royal, did give Royal a 10, because at that point we had switched over to the 10-point scale. And
it's deserved. I mean, Royal, I think, the quality of life stuff in Royal really fixes most of the minor complaints. I mean, I think,
you can use the gun.
Yeah, like, seriously. You can use your time. I mean, it's like the first, especially the first, like, third of original Persona 5, like, you never just get a night to do, like, you're just overwhelmed by systems and tutorials because you never get a minute to like just breathe and try stuff. And I think Royal is so much better about letting you play the video game, you know, like it just lets you just do it in such a better way.
Well, the ironic thing is that a lot of those nights that Morgana would tell you to go to sleep early on in base game aren't there anymore. But then a lot of the nights in the final month, like the January month of Royal, Morgana's telling you to go to sleep a lot, like early on in that. So it like shifted a little bit, but not in like it's better that there's open at the beginning, right?
I wonder if that was like a game balance thing where like by adding all those extra days, I wonder if they were afraid it would like mess up, like having you would basically I'm in my Royal playthrough. I just ran out of stuff to do. Like there were free nights where I was like, "There's literally nothing left that I can do." So I wonder if they like were just like, we don't just want people to like stand around. Like there are only so many times you can like go to the arcade or do batting practice or whatever, or fishing. Like especially after you have the trophies, even. So it is kind of funny that like they did a great job adding darts and like a lot of stuff they added is. But like I do think that like the game is so big that you can just run out of things.
Yeah, well, we talked about that because it is a replay for both of us. Even if I'm playing the story for the first time, like playing the base P5, it's a replay technically. And so I think both of us did eventually run out of stuff by the third semester. But for a lot of people, especially your first time through, and I had remembered like you gave, I think Tom, myself, and Barrett all this advice was like go try the things that you're interested in. Like obviously, yes, you have a day and a night, and you might be limited some days, but go try the things. Like don't try unless you're really that type of person. Don't try to min-max your run through. Like go chase the confidant links you're interested in, try the side stuff. And I think especially with Royal giving you more time early, it allows people to do that and not feel like oh no, I used a night, now I don't have a night for 3 weeks. It's sort of like you have more chances to like quote unquote mess up and still recover and try other stuff that you might be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
The two pieces of advice, Andrew, you gave me before I started Persona 5, the base game way back when, I still remember them. The two pieces of advice were, when you get to Okumura's palace, don't give up, because that's where everyone gives up. And then the other piece was, max out Kawakami first. It's going to suck, but do it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I think the other one I do a lot is, especially for people trying for trophies, is to save every other in-game day.
Oh, because, you told me to do that too. Yeah.
Because the way the save slots work, you end up with, I think you have 15 slots, and then there's like a cloud save slot, so you have 16 total, which means if you're saving, you can't do it exactly because it skips, but if you have a rough save every 15 days, it basically just means at any given point, if you really have to, you can revert a month, which generally means you can go back a palace. So for for trophy hunting especially, it's like certain moments in the game obviously are like huge transitions that start to lock you out of content. In the original game, the most important one was after November you lose access to school, which means you can no longer get the reading every book trophy if you never did every book in the library. So November specifically was like I never wanted to like spoil that for people, but it was also like a really like a hard cutoff of like, make sure you're going to the library, because that's like one of the only missable trophies.
They really lowered. We talked about this a little bit too, but they've really lowered the bar in terms of the Royal trophy compared to the base game trophy too.
Dude, I got the platinum. I finished the game, and I had to go to Harajuku and do like the maid cafe. I think I had to do like 2 other things, and I just had the platinum just playing. It's like I cannot believe how much easier they made it. The Persona 5 platinum is one of the hardest platinums I've ever done. I mean, it's like it really like getting the compendium complete, getting every social link in one playthrough. You have to beat, a lot of like pretty hard optional bosses. You have to beat the Caroline Justine fight. Like, it's a pretty rough game for platinum, and Royal is just not. And I wonder if that's in response to people just feeling locked out of vanilla P5.
Yeah. Well, one moment I definitely wanted to talk about, because it was the moment we originally tried to get you on the show for. Is the pancakes moment. Because we told this
I was
story.
so mad at you.
That was we told basically our sides of the story, and I was talking to Barrett about this actually I think just yesterday, and we were like, because he was right there by us as well, and it's just this really funny moment of you, me, and Barrett knew where things went, and Tom didn't, and for him to guess
totally
like that,
tricked me.
Well, you have to understand how like
tricked me.
Tell
me your side of this.
You were coming in every day, and it was just like that was such a fun time period, because like you would literally just like burst through the door with excitement and be like, last night I did this. And like, we were really enjoying getting your like progress reports and hearing how you were doing and like understanding like, oh man, I can't wait until he sees this. And so like, I was like actually surprisingly invested in your playthrough. And I was like, oh, I cannot wait. Because that was like the peak of my obsession too. That was when like I knew the game like the back of my hand. I was playing it like so regularly that I like really knew everything you were getting to as you got to it. Now I feel like, you know, especially like 2 years into a pandemic, like I you know, am furthest out that I've been. I think I was saying to you earlier, this is the longest I've gone. The fact that it's been a year since I've played right now is the longest I've gone since 2016 without playing a version of Persona 5. But yeah, so I was really like,
we've been playing for that entire year on one run.
That's so great. Oh god, that's great. Yeah, didn't Barrett say he beat it like multiple times in the time that you guys? Yeah.
I think since we started, he beat it on stream, and then he beat it again. And I think maybe there was a bit of a half extra playthrough in there somewhere.
He's honestly, I would say we're probably inverted, where most of his are on Royal and most of mine were on Vanilla.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was really invested in how you were doing, and so. I was so paranoid of you getting spoiled was the other thing. Like, I remember you would come in and ask questions and you'd be like, sorry if this is annoying. And I was like, no, please ask us and don't Google. Because if you Google, you're definitely going to stumble into a spoiler. So we were like very protective.
I got a little spoiled actually in Royal because I saw that like halfway through my first Royal playthrough, I saw in some wiki somewhere one headline was like Maruki's Palace. And I was like, oh... And I didn't learn any of the context around it, but like I did know that was coming in some way.
Man, that's actually the most brutal spoiler, I think, because when you get to that, you know, that like moment where you sort of get to the beginning of it, but you can't do it yet. I was like, who is this? Like, I didn't guess at all. Like, I was like not even close. I think I had some other bad guess. I also, like, I don't know if you went really deep into theories, but early on, there was a theory that Maruki, because like he pushed up his glasses, he looked a lot like Joker, and there were all these theories that he was going to be Joker from the future coming back. And when we got to that palace, it was futuristic. I was like, for 1 minute, I was like,
man,
no. But yeah, so we were really invested in your playthrough, and when you came in that day and you were like, hey, I have a question, and you just nailed the pancakes thing, which like, to this day, I've never met, and like everybody talks to me about their Persona playthroughs, I have never met a single other person who actually picked up on that. But if I remember right, rather than trying to lie to you or react, I think I was just like, oh really? I didn't even notice that. Like, I think I tried to just play it off, if I remember right.
I think you pretty clearly told me it was like, no, you're just imagining things. You're like,
oh, maybe I lied. Yeah.
Like, yeah, and you played it so straight that I legitimately was questioning whether or not that had actually happened or if I saw that for the entire rest of the run. But the amazing thing again to me was like that happened, and then months later when the actual reveal came, and I think I just texted you in all caps pancakes.
I think I have a Slack screenshot somewhere of it. Yeah.
You sent me this Slack screenshot of months earlier. You and because I had taken a break. It took me a while to get through the rest of the game or whatever. And like, you had sent me a Slack screenshot of you and Jonathon just like panic messaging each other like moments after that had happened.
Yeah, because we were all sitting in basically a triangle, and Tom couldn't see me because of the pillar by our desks. But Andrew could see me, and I could see Andrew's face. And so I was just typing, I think, pretending that I was doing other work, just being like, Andrew, oh my god, Andrew.
So good.
That was truly amazing to be out of that loop for so long.
I was so proud of you when you beat it, though. I mean, and same with Barrett. Like, Barrett, I think unfortunately, like, probably hated the game by being forced to, like, recapture so much of it for my review. And then when he got to go back and play casually was when it felt like he was falling in love with it.
Yeah.
He was probably also super spoiled from some of the later areas we had him capture.
But it doesn't seem to have dissuaded him from diving down into the totality.
He's like,
and the fun thing was that I got to have similar moments to that moment on this show with Jonathon, because he didn't know anything about Sumire or like that reveal. And like I made joke at one point early on about like, ha ha ha, Kasumi's been dead the whole time, and like didn't pick up on it
and
at
I
all.
had no track, and like and a credit to our audience too, because no one ever spoiled anything for me. Like I never really saw anything of like. I have been luckily preserved throughout this, year experiment, and to have those moments, I think, after.
So this becomes my real question then.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to do this? If Persona 6 happens, are you going to do this format for your first playthrough?
Oh, that's a good question.
No, I feel like first playthrough is a bad idea, because then A, it's going to take us a year or whatever to play through it, and B, this is something we already said that we're not going to do. We're not going to jump right into Golden, but like it's even a first playthrough for Persona 4 would be weird, right? Because like we wouldn't know what's coming in a way that like we couldn't plan episodes.
That's true. That's true.
That's where
so
it becomes a
tricky.
big question. Yeah. I guess that is the weird thing, is it will probably also depend when P6 comes out, because it is like, I don't know if Tom and I are still doing the jobs that we do. One of us might have to very well review Persona 6 or like, do coverage of it and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a...
Liana will probably jump on that one.
That's fair. Yeah.
She really loves Persona also.
Yeah, it starts like, they usually start around April, I think, right? So it's like, it also just depends on the literal time. I guess like your first playthrough might have to, you couldn't even start it for a year, let alone take a year to play it, depending on when it came out.
That'd be really funny. It comes out in like September and it's like, well, I gotta wait 6 months to play this sequel. Looking forward to half my life.
The thing I thought was interesting in looking at all these timeline things or calendar things is that they're the same, like, I don't know what the right way to put it is, like calendar year, like the date of the week of the month lines up with the day of the week for Persona 4 and Persona 5. Like as if they were taking place in the same year or whatever, or like however many years apart.
They take place in their release year, right? I think
So it could be that was just lined up well, right? It just lined up to be the same.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier. So like, I don't know. I don't think this is a spoiler whatsoever. In Persona 3, one of the party members, my obvious favorite for obvious reasons, is Koromaru, who's the dog who uses a little knife and can use psychic powers. And there's another character named Ken, who's like really young. He's not a high school kid. He's like 9 or something. He's like this kid that through circumstances ends up being a part of the party. So in the Persona 4 fighting games, because Tom, to your point about the years, they let it line up. So they actually used the Persona 3 release year and then did the math on how old those characters would be if they interacted a year after the Persona 4 timeline took place. So they're all aged up after high school age into like college age. But Ken obviously is in high school because Ken is younger. So Ken in that game is a little older, like he's the age the characters were in the original game. And Koromaru wears this orange jacket. It's this like cute little orange jacket, and it's Ken's jacket from when he was like a 9-year-old in Persona 3. And it's so like such a cool character design thing. So they do play with it. There's also in I forget if it's only in portable, but like I think it's only in Persona 3 portable. You can meet Vincent from Catherine is in a bar.
Interesting.
So the main character of Catherine is there, and then you also meet they go to the high school from Persona 4, and you meet Yukiko, who ends up being a party member character in Persona 4. Like, there's lots of like cool connections they've done, and they do play with the timeline. And I think you're right. I think it is meant to be fixed. Like, it's not a 20XX thing. Like, I think they're actually like within those fixed years. Like, I do think Persona 5 takes place in 2017 or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. Well, I think we've kind of run out of time here. This has been lovely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What a fun... I'm happy I could be here right before the end. Happy we finally made it happen, and I'm proud of you guys. I think it's cool that you did this. I think it's 50 episodes is remarkable. I have started so many little side projects during the pandemic and then just forgot or just didn't do them. So I admire that you guys stuck.
Yeah, I'm really excited that this week we're going to be able to finish this game, and it'll literally be the first time in 50 weeks that we have not played Persona, right? Like, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Are you guys are you announcing a new thing? Are you going to do thoughts?
We've said we're not going to do Golden. Immediately.
Yeah.
Because, like, life stuff happens, and like I was talking about with the planning stuff, it's a little trickier. We are thinking of doing some stuff that we've said with, Strikers, yeah, because it is the direct sequel, and that I think starts in like July. We're going to talk about more of hard plans next week though on the final episode because
Nice.
we still need to nail some stuff down. But we know we want to do that, and we know we're not doing Golden quite yet.
Yeah.
Nice. That's cool.
Which gives me, I think, I was going to say, just gives me time to actually maybe play Golden before we do a show about it. Because honestly, this whole conversation, I've been like, yeah, maybe I'll start Golden this weekend. Why not?
You could see that would be an interesting twist. Is that it can be whereas I played Royal and you hadn't. You can play Golden, and I just won't have played it, and then I'll be the blind one going into that.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
Yeah.
We do have a little bit of finals though. Let's do our quizzes.
Yes.
Jonathan, Andrew, we leave one pop quiz to the viewers, but then Jonathan always has this segment called Persona Pseudonym, where he gives us the name of a shadow when you first fight it before you've like captured its mask, and then we have to say what the shadow actually is, like what its real name is.
Oh my God.
And normally this goes by palace, like whatever palace we're in at the time, or the month of the palace we're in at the time. The last few episodes have been very hard because he just is pulling from the whole game.
There's no world where I will get this.
Yeah, I almost basically got last week's, but it was like, it felt very lucky.
I picked what I hope is a simple one.
Okay.
And I can give a clue, I think, perhaps after, but both of you can obviously guess. But who is originally known as the Brutal Cavalryman?
Oh. I think I know this one.
Those are, I mean, the problem for me is it's been long enough that I've played since I barely remember their real.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was looking at a list, well, because there's also like the guys on the roof of the first palace are the guys that pop in my head.
Yeah, because there's two cavalrymen in Kamoshida's palace. Not name-wise. There's two dudes on horses.
Yeah.
I remember the name of one of them.
Well, Tom, what's the name? And then Andrew, I'll tell you based on your general guess. Because I'm not expecting you to remember the name by now.
So the name of one of them, of the very first horse you fight, I believe is Eligor.
Okay. Is that the name you're going with?
That's the name I'm going with because I don't remember the name of the other horse people.
Well, you're wrong, you dummy.
Okay.
Wow.
But no, you are both correct in thinking that this is Barrett, who is...
Barrett.
Is
not
Eligor
to be confused
different?
with Barrett. I think...
Barrett Courtney.
Barrett Courtney. Yeah. He's always on horseback, that kid. It's crazy. But yeah, Barrett is...
Okay. I mixed them up. Barrett is the weaker one. Eligor is the stronger horse person from Kamoshida's palace.
Okay, yeah.
So I was right about it being a horse person from Kamoshida's palace. I just didn't remember the right name.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't have context on these, and the reason triply embarrassing I don't know this is the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona games do share those enemies. So I mean, they're demons in SMT and shadows here, but there's quite a bit of crossover between those characters, so it's triply, quadruply embarrassing that you get that.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to someone just recently because there was the Soul Hackers sequel that was announced by Atlas recently, and again, like the enemies pop up, and I was like, man, whoever originally produced these enemies for Atlas must just be making, like, if they do residuals for enemy design, they would be the wealthiest person from Atlas because they are in everything. It's great.
Yeah.
It's funny to me, real quick, I know we're wrapping up, but like it is funny to me that like Pokemon does this exact same thing, but for some reason it doesn't feel as weird in Pokemon. Like
Pokemon
I
is the closest thing I think Pokemon does recently is where they're doing those like different forms, like regional forms of the same, because it is interesting seeing these characters expressed in different art styles and different iterations. But no, you're not wrong. I mean, I think that aspect of it is very Pokemon-like. Hey, also, I forgot...
Other RPGs do, too. Like, Dragon Quest has had its slimes forever, right? Like,
that's true.
Extent.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Andrew?
I was going to say, I meant to have a 1-minute soapbox, and I'm glad this reminded me to, which is that... I apologize for wading into controversy. I know there was a discussion about, like, Persona... fans if they should play SMT when it came out and all of that stuff, and I won't get too deep into that. I just want to say, on a platform for people who like P5 specifically, who are maybe looking for something else, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Sharp FE,
I was going to ask you
is so good. It is like secretly, it is much closer to Persona.
It is.
But it actually has a really, really cool different battle system that is actually my favorite RPG battle system maybe ever. And it's really cool. It uses some Fire Emblem characters. Anyway, I just wanted to take a moment to recommend that if you were looking for another game to play and you were not ready to jump into the other Persona games, or you only have access to a Switch, that game is fantastic, incredibly underrated.
They did port it to Switch, right?
It's on Switch. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, because it was a review originally.
I would second that recommendation. The only thing I will say, though, is as somebody who only had played Persona 5, lower your expectations of the social aspects of it.
100%.
Just lower that part of it. But otherwise, it is a really, really good game with a very similar sort of like really cool art style, really cool visual design, really, really good battle system. I'm totally on board with all of that.
Yeah, and I think the reason it is definitely nowhere near as robust as Persona Social Links, but it is much more robust than SMT in that regard,
Sure.
Because there aren't any. So yeah, I think it's a safer bridge point for newer players for sure. Also, on the Switch version, you can get a Joker outfit, so you can just play as Joker anyway.
Nice.
Yeah. I definitely did that for a little while
me too.
when I played.
I actually mainlined the game to get that outfit, and then did everything else really slow.
Okay, and the last thing we have to wrap up is the pop quiz for the viewers, which of course you can let us know your answers at dornology@gmail.com, the youtube.com/dornology. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush on Twitter. And Andrew?
Oh, I'm Garfep on Twitter, GARFEP.
Yeah. So you can let any of us know, including Andrew, the answer to this question. Here's the deal. Next week, I figure I wanted to end with a really hard one. Like, just the hardest question I could possibly think of. But next week, I figure I'm going to pull something from the actual week that is happening. So this week, I'm going to give the hardest pop quiz question that I can think of for this game. Something that if you put a gun to my head and asked me to answer, I would not be able to. You ready for this?
I can't. This feels like an Andrew wind up to a goof.
It is both. What is Mishima's first name?
I actually don't know.
Oh my god, I don't know. Oh.
It's like my least favorite character.
Well, the running gag for us has been how funny it is that the game, even if you've maxed out his confidant rank, and even if you are 100+ hours in, you can still be like, the Phantom Thieves? What do you mean, dude? This is so confusing. Like, you can just totally be an asshole to this guy.
Guess what? None of us know his first name. So
Oh my god.
That's really funny.
His first name. Let us know. Send us a tweet, send us an email, send us a comment.
It's so good.
And if you have to know it without looking it up, because it's really easy to look up.
Yeah.
Scout's honor here. Yeah.
God, that's a good question.
That's really good.
There you go.
Oh,
that's all we've got. Thank you so much again, Andrew, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was so awesome to be here. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
It's time to wrap up. Once again, next week will be our final episode of the Persona 5 Royal run-through. So look forward to that.
Season 1.
Season 1.
That's how I've had to label it in podcast things. I'm like, yeah, I guess it's season 1. That works.
Jonathan, any last words?
No, I think just, thank you again, Andrew. Like I said, we've been talking about you so much on the show, so it was a treat to have you on and to talk about this stuff, which we haven't gotten to do. Like you said, we used to talk about this every day, so to be able to do this again was really fun, and I hope everyone at home enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Morgana's telling us to go to bed, and we gotta sign off.
So dark.
So we'll see you next time.